Well, to our fellow Americans, brave warriors and steadfast allies, we said it would not be a fair fight, and it has not. That the United States is decimating the radical Iranian regime's military in a way the world has never seen before. This is gritty and tireless work, and I cannot begin to explain how incredibly proud I am of the extraordinary courage, tenacity, and grit, and professionalism within the joint force. No drama, no hesitation. In the middle of the day, in the middle of the night, we will stop at nothing to win. The United States Navy destroys 120 Iranian vessels in the Persian Gulf, frigates, corvettes, fast attack boats. The engagement lasts hours. Tomahawk missiles, Harpoon anti-ship missiles, A-10 strike packages. The firepower committed to this operation is staggering by any historical measure. The result is unambiguous. 120 Iranian military vessels are gone. The Strait of Hormuz is still closed, because Iran did not send its navy to close the strait. Iran sent 1,500 small boats, fast, cheap, expendable, each one carrying a crew of 2 or 3 men, a machine gun, and sometimes a rocket. Individually, they are not threats. Collectively, as a swarm moving through the narrow waters of the strait simultaneously, they are a problem that the most expensive naval force in human history was not designed to solve. The Navy spent over $600 million destroying 120 vessels. The strait is still blocked by boats that cost $50,000 each. The math does not work. Something has to change. The problem is not capability. The United States military has more raw firepower than any force that has ever existed. The problem is match. The Navy was designed and built and optimized for a specific kind of war. Large ships, open oceans, peer adversaries with destroyers and submarines and carrier air wings. It is exceptional at that war. The Strait of Hormuz is not that war. It is a 21-mile wide channel crowded with small, fast, cheap threats moving in every direction simultaneously. The weapons that defeat a destroyer are wasteful against a speedboat. The sensor systems that track a submarine are not optimized for tracking 100 small surface contacts in cluttered, shallow coastal water. The Navy brought the right force to the wrong problem. The strait is still closed. The A-10 Thunderbolt II was not designed for this mission. It was designed in the 1970s to destroy Soviet tank columns advancing through the Full Gap in Germany. It is slow. It is ugly. It has been scheduled for retirement multiple times over the past 20 years. The Air Force has repeatedly tried to get rid of it and been blocked each time, usually by the soldiers whose lives depended on it. The A-10 is built around its gun, the GAU-8 Avenger, a 7-barrel rotary cannon that fires 30mm depleted uranium rounds at a rate of up to 4,200 rounds per minute, 65 rounds per second. Each round costs approximately $137. The aircraft carries 1,174 rounds in its drum magazine. At the forward operating base in the region, A-10s are being prepared for the Hormuz mission. Ground crews load the GAU-8 drum with rounds. The loading process for the full drum takes time. The magazine holds over 1,000 rounds of 30mm ammunition, and the loading system has to cycle every round into position correctly. The crew chiefs run the function check when loading is complete. Under the wings, Maverick air-to-surface missiles are loaded onto the pylons. The AGM-65 Maverick gives the A-10 its standoff capability against larger vessels. The gun handles the small boats. The Mavericks handle anything bigger that needs to be engaged from outside gun range. Mark 82 500-pound bombs are loaded on additional pylons for any fixed targets that require a larger weapon. The A-10 pilots assigned to the Hormuz mission receive their operational briefing. The intelligence officer walks through the threat picture. 1,500 small boats operating in groups moving through the strait in coordinated swarm patterns. The boats are fast, capable of 40 knots or more. They are low to the water, difficult to track on radar in the surface clutter of a busy strait, and they are everywhere simultaneously. The pilots review their engagement parameters. The GAU-8 is effective against small surface targets at ranges up to 12,000 feet. At that range, the 30mm rounds retain enough energy to penetrate the thin hulls of the small boats and detonate against any fuel or ordnance on board. A 1-second burst delivers 65 rounds to a point target. Against a small boat, 1 burst is typically sufficient. The A-10s taxi to the runway in pairs. Each aircraft is heavy with fuel and a full weapons load. The engines spool up. 2 General Electric TF-34 turbofans, producing a combined 17,000 pounds of thrust. The A-10 does not accelerate like a fighter jet. It builds speed steadily and lifts off at a relatively low airspeed. The aircraft climbs away from the base at a shallow angle and turns toward the strait. The A-10's cruise speed is approximately 340 miles per hour. At that speed, the aircraft is slow enough to acquire and track small surface targets visually without overshooting them on a gun run. This is the first and most fundamental advantage the A-10 brings to this problem. Speed. A fast jet, an F/A-18 or an F-16, approaches a small surface target at 500 knots or more. The pilot has seconds to acquire the target, establish a firing solution, pull the trigger, and break off the attack before overshooting the target.
At 500 knots, the aircraft is covering over 800 feet per second. In a confined strait with other vessels nearby, the margin for error is extremely small. At 340 knots, the A-10 has more time. The pilot can see the target, he can identify it, he can adjust his aim, he can fire, observe the impact, and fire again if necessary, all before he needs to break off the attack. In a swarm engagement with dozens of small boats in close proximity to each other and to civilian vessels, the difference between 500 knots and 340 knots is the difference between a usable weapon system and an unusable one. The A-10 rolls into its attack run. The nose comes down. The target, a fast boat moving at speed through the strait, fills the HUD. The pilot adjusts his aim point for the boat's movement. He presses the trigger. The GAU-8 fires. The sound is distinctive, not the sharp crack of a rifle, but a deep mechanical buzzsaw tone that lasts less than a second for a short burst. The rounds leave the barrel at over 3,000 feet per second. 65 rounds arrive at the target in 1 second. The boat's hull, aluminum and fiberglass, offers no resistance to 30mm depleted uranium. The rounds penetrate, and the boat comes apart. The A-10 is already pulling off the target and scanning for the next contact. The economics of the engagement have changed completely. A Harpoon anti-ship missile costs $1.2 million. A Standard missile costs $1 to $2 million depending on the variant. A Tomahawk costs over $1 million. These are the weapons the Navy fires at Iranian surface threats. The A-10 fires a 1-second burst. 65 rounds at $137 each. $8,095. The boat is gone. The next boat takes another 1-second burst. The aircraft carries enough ammunition for approximately 18 1-second bursts before the drum is empty. 18 boats, 1 aircraft, 1 sortie. Total ammunition cost approximately $160,000. The Navy spent $600 million on the first 120 boats. The A-10 can engage 18 boats per sortie at a fraction of that cost. The math has flipped. Multiple A-10s are now working the strait simultaneously. Each aircraft is assigned a sector. The controllers in the E-2D Hawkeye orbiting above the strait are feeding contact positions to each pilot. As one A-10 completes its gun runs and turns back toward the base to rearm, the next aircraft is already inbound to its sector. The coverage is continuous. The boats that are still moving in the strait are being prosecuted in sequence. For the first time since the swarm entered the strait, the number of active contacts on the tactical picture is decreasing. The A-10's survivability in this environment is a critical part of why it works. The aircraft is built like nothing else in the US inventory. The pilot sits inside a titanium bathtub, a tub-shaped armored enclosure that can withstand hits from 23mm cannon fire. The aircraft has redundant hydraulic systems, redundant flight control systems, and can fly on a single engine. It can take cataclysmic damage and still return to base. In the Hormuz environment, small boats armed with heavy machine guns and rocket-propelled grenades represent a genuine threat to low-flying aircraft. A fighter jet is vulnerable to these weapons during a low-altitude gun run. The A-10 is not invulnerable, but it is far more likely to absorb a hit from a heavy machine gun and keep flying than any other aircraft in the inventory. At the forward base, the A-10 rearming cycle runs at maximum tempo. Each aircraft lands, takes as retailing buttons and ammunition point, and shuts down only long enough to reload the GAU-8 drum and replace expended Mavericks. The drum reload takes longer than a typical aircraft rearming. The magazine has to be fully cycled to ensure proper feeding. The crews are trained to do it as fast as possible. The turnaround time is under 20 minutes for a full ammunition reload. The aircraft launches again. The cycle continues without stopping. By the end of the first day of A-10 operations over the strait, the picture has changed. Hundreds of small boats have been destroyed. The swarm that was blocking the strait has been thinned to a fraction of its original size. The boats that are still moving are doing so in smaller groups, changing course frequently, attempting to avoid the A-10 patrol sectors. The tanker traffic that had been held at anchor outside the strait begins to move cautiously toward the entrance. Escort vessels from the naval formation move into position alongside the first tanker. The corridor is not fully clear, but it is clearing. The strategic lesson playing out over the Strait of Hormuz is not about the A-10 specifically. It is about matching the weapon to the threat. The Navy's missiles and carrier air wing are not wrong. They are right for the threat they were designed to defeat. The swarm of small boats in the confined waters of a narrow strait is a different threat, and it requires a different weapon. The right weapon costs $137 per round. It flies at 340 knots. It can take a hit from a machine gun and keep flying. It has been in service since 1977. It was going to be retired. Instead, it is the aircraft that is opening the Strait of Hormuz. The A-10s fly their final sorties of the day. As the sun drops toward the horizon, each aircraft returns to the forward base, lands, and shuts down. The pilots step off the aircraft and are debriefed. The gun camera footage is reviewed. The contact list is updated. The results are passed to the Joint Force Commander. Tomorrow, the tankers will move. The strait that was closed by 1,500 cheap boats is being reopened by an aircraft that the Air Force wanted to retire. The most sophisticated military in human history solved its most expensive tactical problem with a 40-year-old aircraft and a gun that cost less per shot than a tank of aviation fuel. The right weapon, the right problem.